One, two, three. Ah, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another barefoot finance sermon from the sunlit, from the edge of the world, from the glorious beaches of St. Bart's, from the French Caribbean, where the palm fronds whisper and island life breathes easy this Easter Sunday morning. And yes, it is just me and you again. No suits, certainly no scripts, and no agenda. Just the riot of voices in my head. And today, boy are they screaming at me. Because caught in the warm breeze and in the twilight hush, I find myself impossibly opposed to almost everything being said in financial media right now. So without further ado, this is Barefoot Finance. I am Hugh Hendry. I am the acid capitalist. And I am here to tell you they got it all wrong. The economic policies of the Trump 2.0 administration, I believe they're the most sensationally courageous steps we've seen in at least 50 years, maybe more. You want something sensational? Well, I don't think the Bank of Japan will hike rates again. Wait, no, sorry, that's for another time, another show. No, today I want to suggest that the death of money, my prophecy for what seems like it's been a long time, I want to say that the death of money may just have been averted. Now, for years I claimed, well, it's a fact, money dies every 100 years. Just think, the gold standard, it collapsed, what, a century ago, 1930? So monetary systems, they come, they expire, they leave economic wreckage behind, stagnation, revolt. But the money moves on. Now the dollar treasury system that has ruled our monetary world for certainly the last 50 years, that system was dying rapidly. But this American administration, they might actually save it. They might patch it up, address its flaws, and give it perhaps another half century to run. We'll have to see. But one thing, though, is for sure. It won't be half as generous to asset prices as the last regime. The death, or rather the chance of death, it may be receding. But the new American regime demands fundamental root and branch. No, it's not the dentist, it's reform. A redistribution of the economic spoils. You know what I'm going to say. More Main Street, less Wall Street. So kick back, my dear friends. Chill for a while. And let me escort you to warmer climes as we try to vibe on the finer political and economic currents of the present moment. Okay, let's play word association. What have I got in my toolkit? I got Trump, Lincoln, and the war on quiet exploitation. Now that should keep me busy for a moment. Now, call me seriously crazy. I mean, call me what you like. But I'm thinking right now of that scene from Airplane. I'm serious. And don't call me Shirley. Anyway, I am the acid capitalist and I don't know what I'm talking about. But I was sitting here, I was looking out over the blue, azure Caribbean Sea the other day. I'm a poet and I don't know it. Anyway, it struck me. The Donald Trump guy and Abe Lincoln. I know, hold that thought, work with me. But I was thinking they might have more in common than your history professor or, let's face it, your yoga instructor. I don't know, someone you meet every day. Trump and Abe, they might have more in common than you would ever admit. Actually, hold, because I'm going to need a big flourish of another historical character. I'm going to need a lot of Alexander Hamilton to go with the Abe. And you know what? I'm probably going to have to dip into the English Enlightenment. I can feel a bit of Ricardo coming on. So, this is going to take a little bit of sorting in my little head, but bear with me. Come with me. Come on. Come with me all the way back to 1791. I mean, what the fuck? Where are we? We're resting on Hamilton's great policy vision, because he called for tariffs and subsidies to build American industry, to stop the nascent nation relying on the imports of capital goods from Europe. He was aiming to stake out some economic independence. You know, it was perhaps the moment when America began to become great. And you know what? If Hamilton built the factory, Lincoln, Abe, that dude, he burned the plantation. That line just came to me like in a flourish. And you know what? I like it. Build the factory, raise the plantation. More on that later. But for now, let's stay on the sand a little longer. Stoke the fire of my imagination. Let it roll. Come on, camera, lights, action. I'm ready. So let's drift back to the Woodstock of American capital, to the raw soil of the Republic, and to my man, Alexander Hamilton, the first secretary under Washington. The man who saw factories where mere mortals saw forests. The first great financial engineer of the great republic. A man whose brain ran on gunpowder and spreadsheets. An asset capitalist, perhaps. Hamilton, he wasn't just building a nation. No, I mean, the guy was wiring it. Wiring. I cannot speak. If you're in America, forgive me. There must be subtitles somewhere. Subtitles on a podcast. Anyway, he was wiring the great continent of America, one factory at a time. He believed a strong country must build, not just grow, that sovereignty, it needed industry, that the world had to need you, and not just as some kind of punching bag. The world needed you as an essential trade partner. We call that reciprocity. The emerging Republic of America. Now, back in the early days, it was revenue hungry. It was credit thirsty. But my God, it had plenty of purpose back then. Maybe even today. And Hamilton, he knew that profit from all the emergent native industries, he knew that profit would draw in capital from abroad. The man, after all, he was an industrialist at heart. And his tariffs, they weren't conceived of as weapons of destruction. No, they weren't about revenge. I think of them like scaffolding, that they wrapped the infant American industries in a protective tax bubble wrap. They kept European capital goods out. But God, they got the northern looms humming. But it's tool. It wasn't morality the way perhaps Abe Lincoln's toolkit was. Hamilton's tool was the profit margin. You see, to him, economic nationalism, it was more akin to midwifery. He knew that if you give the margins room to breathe, the global capital will come in droves. And so before Lincoln ever used tariffs to torch the southern economy, I mean, did he? Is that contentious? But Hamilton, he'd already planted an intellectual landmine under Ricardo's throne. Now, this was a full generation before the great English economist had even laid out his law of comparative advantage. But Hamilton, he lit the fuse. Ricardo's theory was first published almost 30 years later, in 1817. What does it say? It says that countries should specialize, that they should make what they're best at. But Hamilton, writing, like I said, 25, 30 years before, he rejected Ricardo outright. Now, before I go any further, I want to talk about David Ricardo, the man, the legend, not the economic model, because I got so much time for the guy's backstory, and I certainly don't want to trash him needlessly. You see, David Ricardo, he wasn't born in the ghetto, but neither was he born in a library. Rather, he grew up on the open outcry, the trading floors of the London Exchange. Before economists wore suits, you know what? They wore coffee stains, in London at least, because Ricardo cut his teeth in the London coffee houses, where empire was priced per cup, and debt, the sovereign debt, was the cream that always rose to the top. Now, by 21, David broke with his family over, you know what I'm going to say, religion. Gets in the way, people. God is dead. You're on your own. There are no rules. Anyway, the story goes that Ricardo, being a bit of a coward, being a dreamer, come on, he's a trader, but he fell in love with a Quaker woman named Priscilla. I mean, wow. I thought you only found Priscillas in the desert. What was she doing in the London coffee house in the 18th century? Anyway, Ricardo's family, now, they were Orthodox Jews. And Priscilla, God bless her, but she wasn't. And David, ever the rationalist, he thought, stuff it, and he converted. Became a Christian. And the family, they cut him off. And you know what? Maybe that lit a fire under him. Because by the age of 30, the boy had done well. He'd made a small fortune. He'd bet right on British debt during the Napoleonic Wars. And he got rich on macro. I mean, you gotta call the man an asset capitalist. Retired at 40, richer than them all. Today, I think we'd call his wealth at least $100 million. And what did he do? He bought a country estate, Gatcombe Park, with his sovereign debt booty. And you know, I'm looking at a picture of it. Oh my God, nostalgia. I'm not looking at Gatcombe Park. I'm looking at Sheepscombe House, actually in the same vicinity as Ricardo's maison. Because from the profits from the Y2K collapse, I bought a house in the country near to Ricardo, a proper little place in the Cotswolds. They even, I swear, I'm not making this up, but the villagers, they kept the front pew, the front row in the village church. They kept that just for me and the family. And I had, what did I have? 20 alpacas, 2 llamas, sheep, goats, chickens, you name it. I even had a barefoot grass tennis court. Imagine. Today, of course, is barefoot beaches, not English lush, wet grass that I step upon. I digress. Ricardo, retirement. The boy, he didn't fade. Nope. What did he do? He codified. He took oh my God, I can't speak. He took the instincts that he'd honed from the bond market and he carved them into his own unique economic scripture. He offered us, people like me, the macro guys that were to follow, he offered us a gospel, the law of comparative advantage. And its essence was specialize, trade, trust the ratios. In the parlance of his time, let Portugal make the wine, let England make the cloth, let the world become efficient. You see, Ricardo, he wasn't building nations. This bond guru, no, he was arbitraging them. His mind too pure, too flawless. There were no people, no sweat, no politics. We're talking about the lone trader who sat alone, nurturing his thoughts. But crucially, fatally, a flaw perhaps, but he assumed, which was natural at the time, but he assumed that capital would not cross international borders. He assumed that power, sovereign power, that it didn't matter, that states were nothing more than spreadsheets, that no sovereign power would dream of ever manipulating its own currency for the best part of 30 years just to dominate trade. No, none of that. Ricardo offered a colonial operating system, a Microsoft for the 18th century. He spoke the gospel of Manchester. You grow the sugar, honey. We keep the factories. Almost certainly written in the Queen's English, but exported by the gunboat. You see, Ricardo, that dude made empire look like equilibrium. Now, Hamilton. Now, again, we're going back. So this is like time travel. So Hamilton, stick with me. Hamilton, we're in America. The guy over in America, the guy that was presiding over these kind of thoughts, but like 30 years before. Hamilton wanted to torch Ricardo's comparative advantage. Trump too, in his own special way. I think of the art of the deal as about anti-dependence. You certainly don't want to be the one showing your hand at the poker table whilst someone else counts the deck. You don't let bond kings or Fed chairmen, nudge, nudge, you don't let them write your destiny. And you don't build a republic on imported logic. You don't become someone else's comparative advantage. So that's a way of saying that when your paymasters tell you you need to specialize to be efficient, that you've got to ask yourself, hey, who's holding this debt? And who's calling the shots? Because, my friends, If you can't see the fool at the table, you know you're probably it. I mean, you know that, right? And so you got to ask, who lent? Who lent you the money? Who owns the ports, the data, the pipelines? Who holds the covenant? Because the hands that hold the debt, the ones stacking chips while you play it safe, those are the ones who write the future. And that little empire arising around you, it may not carry your name in the times to come. So be careful. The only question that matters in statecraft is this: whose blinking empire are we building? Because what is the point of the grind, the sacrifice, the quiet endurance if the reward belongs to someone else? Wow. Wow. I mean, is it just me? I mean, don't you see how this rhymes? Don't you see how this rhymes with today? 50 years of running persistent trade deficits funded by selling little participation notes in America's future wealth to the Chinese Communist Party. Ports, I'm thinking Panama. Data, TikTok, anyone? I mean, this reads like a Star Wars scroll, a timeline hopping from the 18th century to the 21st. The Republic versus the Empire. And think about it. China doesn't depend on US exports the way North America depends on them for everything, from surgical masks in a pandemic to semiconductors as the AI race for world dominance heats up. So before Hamilton, before Trump 2.0, I want to say that America was looking at 100 years of Argentinian style impoverishment. That whilst Ricardo certainly offered a clean logic, do what you're good at and let the market take care of the rest, Hamilton, he saw through it. He didn't argue. He dismantled it. He understood that if left to the Englishman's compass, America would become the world's farm, a colony of commodities dressed as a republic. You see, Hamilton looked out from his study and he saw Arrakis. I'm going to call this section "The Spice Must Flow." You see, Hamilton didn't see 13 colonies. He saw a desert moon, a wild republic ringed by imperial sovereign creditors. Its soil rich with the spice of the age: cotton, grain, fur, sugar, ambition. And he saw that other sovereigns viewed America like Arrakis. We're in the world of doom, a raw, extractive frontier, a place to be harvested, not herd, a resource, not yet a nation, maybe never to be one. Its silence mistaken for consent. The British, the Dutch, the French, all circling, all holding promissory notes, all licking their lips for another yield from the colonial spice fields. Because the spice must flow. That was the simple rule. But not into Philadelphian banks, nor into Baltimore shipyards, nor factories with stars and stripes bolted to their walls. No. The spice was supposed to flow into European vaults, into imperial exchanges, into Lombard Street ledgers. In the modern parlance, into China's perpetual trade surpluses of the early 21st century. But Hamilton, and perhaps Trump as well, saw the trap. They understood the nature of the game. The comparative advantage was a mirage. Export the spice, import the rest, and live forever. You know what that is? Do you know what that spells? Dependency. It's a formula for subjugation, disguised as a noble theory of the Enlightenment. And so Hamilton raised his pen like a sword, and he wrote the rather dull-titled Report on Manufacturers. Now, my friends, it was not a memo. It was not policy. What it was a doctrine, a dam. Tariffs, not as walls, but as redirection. Controlling the sluice gates, slowing the flow, gathering it, refining it, and distilling the precious spice trade into American sovereignty. These men knew that without metal, without machines, without the means of production, the nascent American Republic would stay a desert colony, dancing to the exotic rhythms written in faraway foreign capitals. It would stay a place to be harvested, not heard, a terrain, its lands to be conquered, not understood. And turning to today, the spice, the old spice. Did you ever try that men's aftershave? Oh my God. Had a great advert, but TV advert. The spice still flows, of course. The enormous American Farm Belt, in code, in transparent contract law, in civility, in the black pulse of ambition and data centers. It flows in speech across oceans, carried on container ships, sometimes invisible, frictionless, priced to move to the highest bidder. But the creditors have changed. The empires and their totalitarians, they wear softer suits these days, not jackboots. Their flags are more subtle. The debt, now whilst it's enormous, it's kind of hidden now. It's structured in swap lines. It's played like a pawn shop. Loans packaged by anonymous counterparties, like swapping Rolex watches in black boxes, shadowed in treaty language and payment corridors. Oh my God, I'm waxing. I'm getting very lyrical. Hamilton still, he speaks to all of us today. His warning still drifts across the dunes. If you do not control the production, if you do not build the machines, then you are the spice, and someone else is flying the ship. Okay, so this section, let's call this section The Media Misquotes the Machinery. Because as I indicated at the beginning of this very long sermon, I'm running out of sand, I'm running out of beach to tread here. But there's just so much noise in the system, so much media bias baked into the headlines that I fear that you, the good folk, I fear that you might have missed what's really happening. Let's take Howard Lutnick, the US Commerce Secretary, a bond king. Not really cut from the same cloth as a Ricardo, but a bond king. Now, the media, perhaps directed by what I sense is a more malign sovereign force, the media grabbed a quote of his and they bent it out of all shape, all purpose. They turned it into something cartoonish, a mockery of itself. Now, Lutnick, what did he say? Let me tell you what he said. He said, the army of millions and millions of human beings screwing in little screws to make iPhones, that kind of thing is going to come to America. And just like that, they laughed. They sneered. They shared the meme. An obese American, a sewing machine, a joke about dignity and decline. But the line was twisted, pulled out of context, chewed up by the algos. A sovereign black ops hoax, I would suggest. Because what Howard was describing, it wasn't a race to the bottom. It wasn't the return of the sweatshop labour. It was something else. It was Hamiltonian. He was talking about automation, scale, resilience, about bringing the machine home. He was imagining a sovereign industrial core, a reimagined citadel, not staffed by millions with tiny screwdrivers, but operated by skilled engineers, builders, American minds inside American systems humming in synchronicity. But the media doesn't want that story told. It prefers the parody, the punchline. And that's why I say to you, beware the narrative. Beware the memes designed to belittle your ambition. Beware the black ops of economic humiliation. Ask yourself, who is spinning the image of America as a buffoon at the sewing machine? Who benefits most when the Republic forgets how to build? Now, the Trump administration, whatever else you say about it, it's not trying to onshore low-value labour. It's trying to midwife something much grander. A domestic network of automated production, a machine frontier, a Hamiltonian dream lit by silicon, powered by code. The Trump administration is not trying to return the nation to the factory floor, but trying to rebuild the factory. Not the old one, but the next one, the future one. And you know what? That really scares the mercantilists, because they remember what happened the last time America built the machines. Because America, it didn't sew, it scaled. Boom, 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 boom. What am I going to discuss? Okay, this section is tariffs as moral disturbance. Trump, the inverted Lincoln. And I fear this section could get me into a lot of trouble, so bear with me. Lincoln saw it in Southern cotton. Trump saw it in Asian factories. In both cases, the profit was buried in the poison. And each man, in his own era and his own fashion, had the rare courage to call it out by its name. You see, a continent can birth liberty or landlordism. The difference between the two lies in who pays the taxman. Their paths are inextricably different. One is a road to servitude. The other, a prosperous and free republic. Which do you choose? Now, in the North, we're talking Lincoln's time, the Union bled for progress. Railroads carved steel veins through untamed wilderness. Do I sound like Bruce Springsteen? I don't know. Tariffs, thick as sap, slow, deliberate, protecting the promise of all that industry. Hamilton's ghost whispered of a future that was very worth protecting. But Lincoln, the man in the hat, the man with the beard, he demanded the past be strangled. Industry became the altar, debt its incense. Now, what emerged, I'm not going to say it was perfect, but it was forged in intent for greatness. In the South, cotton whispered a different creed. Do not change. It bloomed like blood, fertilized by flesh, and floated overseas on ships bearing European names. Slavery was Ricardian efficiency, cheap and deadly, but above all, it was profitable. That was its greatest sin. Slavery was like a cheap sugar high for commerce. Now, further south still, in the cone of the hemisphere, Argentina stood similarly blessed by nature. Its soils rich, its skies wide, sustained by pampas wheat and beef dreams. The gaucho slowly disappeared, replaced by the estancia and its landlord aristocracy. In white linen they stood. They counted coins from Liverpool and Madrid. Why industrialize, they asked, when your grass grows gold? The bloody, mindless inertia, the profound resistance to change. No steel railroad veins being sewn into the artery of Argentina. Instead, a colony was being formed under the rich spoils of the landlord. No hunger for tariff, no appetite for change. The future was for others, for the birds. The present was all that mattered. The present was to be preserved. Schools could wait. Steel unnecessary when steak sells. When steak sells, who needs a factory? There was no Hamilton, no Lincoln, no national vision. Only landed oligarchs and silence on horseback. The Argentinian rich remained rich. The poor remained rural and out of sight. Brazil chose another hybrid road, perhaps. Under Vargas, the Republic, the Brazilian Republic, was a republic at the time. It didn't drift into the comfort of exports, but rather it wrestled with destiny. Vargas saw the plantation and the port, but he also saw the empty interior. And so he moved the capital inland. He summoned Brasilia out of dust and he built roads into the jungle. He wasn't waiting for market logic. He imposed industrial logic, steel plants, hydroelectric projects, carved them into the red earth. He taxed, he planned, he most certainly spent. His wasn't a clean revolution. He flirted with fascism, silenced his critics, ruled in some form of velvet authoritarianism. But the man understood something that Argentina would never grasp until Millet. That a nation which fails to industrialize, that's a nation that becomes a servant to the appetites of others. And that wealth built on soil alone is always going to wash away. Michael Pettis, someone I regard as a friend, the modern Keynes. But Michael, in his wonderful book, The Volatility Machine, he critiques Argentina's economic trajectory, or its absence of. You know, the only Harrods outside of London was open in Buenos Aires. The first bank, American bank, to open a branch overseas was Buenos Aires. Argentina was the future. What happened? As Pettis explains, prioritizing immediate spice gains over sustainable financial sovereign planning. It's the peril of confusing transient wealth with enduring sovereignty. It's a cautionary tale of selling the harvest while neglecting to sow the seeds for the future. By contrast, Lincoln and his United States, whether out of spite or vision, but Abe chose an altogether different path. He taxed, he built. The economy suffered briefly in order that it would endure. Hamilton sold bonds, paved a road. Lincoln raised tariffs, lit a match. The result, I'm not claiming the result was utopia, but it was an ambition made real through steel, labour, and sacrifice. All the good stuff. A republic, not always just, not always wise, but capable of surviving its own contradictions. A republic, my friends, not a colony. So let's double down on Abe, because Vargas doesn't really belong here. And Lincoln, he didn't simply abhor slavery on moral grounds. He hated the profits it generated. He understood with a clarity that eluded most of his contemporaries that evil, when lucrative, evil becomes invisible. That the cotton gin was as much a financial instrument as it was a tool of bondage. That sin, when embedded into the machinery of wealth, becomes what? Decorous, respectable, almost sacred. It becomes a malign force. That sovereigns should never be like stock markets and fall prey to false or unsustainable gods. Republics require a resolute need for constant change, not the chains of do not disturb, the mantra of the South, an exalted altar of profit. To strike slavery at its roots and to build a more enduring republic, Lincoln didn't reach first for cannonballs or proclamations, but like his illustrious predecessors, he reached for something way more deadly: the balance sheet. He understood that if you make the ledgers bleed, the system follows. That was his courage. Now, Over a century later, I'm not good with numbers, but Trump entered a global economy that had been polished to a shine and a spit, sanctified by decades of bipartisan consensus and soaring asset prices. But beneath the gloss, an S&P that has multiplied 60 times since 1982. Beneath the shiny gloss, the machinery of human suffering remained. Only now, it no longer took place in cotton fields, but it occurred behind factory walls, across long concrete corridors lit by fluorescent suns, in production lines humming with exhaustion. Foxconn lines. The plantations of the South had become the supply chains of today. The misery once sown into the cotton fields, reborn in the opioid crisis, in the fentanyl shipped by the ton, in hollowed out towns, and in the homelessness that sprawls beneath the glass towers of America's corporate prosperity. A once proud entrepreneurial society had become a gambler's den of speculation. Chinese labourers, undoubtedly richer than their parents, but not rich, not in a way that threatened state control. Their labour produces wonders on the global stage, but their returns never reached their hands, never really. Their physical movement in China, rationed. The Heiku system, tying them to their birthplace, denying them even the right to roam, to resettle, to become more than a number in the land registry. Without the proper stamp, invisible, cut off from the healthcare, from the education, from the full promise of the country they serve. Welcome to the Matrix. Prosperity permitted, but only in doses, sanctified by the state. Too much wealth seen as destabilizing. A Chinese household with savings becomes a sovereign risk. So they're paid just enough to endure, but never enough to accumulate. Denied positive real returns, forced to finance the very system that consumes their future, propping up surplus, subsidizing immense excess, and keeping the illusion intact for everyone else. Lives optimized for someone else's margin. You see, the profit, once again, the profit was in the sin. But this time the sin, it wasn't southern, but it was engineered with mathematical precision by a communist party that had learned to wield capitalism, not as a concession to freedom, but as a weapon of control. It wasn't designed by the Chinese to enrich the average household, nor increase domestic consumption, nor to create a middle class with dignity and agency, to build a new frontier of global demand, another $6 trillion per year and counting in possible consumption that could fill all the world's idle capital stock, that could make a mockery of notions of a savings glut, a more prosperous and even world. I mean, that was the promise of globalization. But no, the Chinese communists, intent on power without limit, decided otherwise. They opted for an economy designed to keep global wages low, production high, and dependency alive. The plantation owner gone, but his profit enduring. Tyranny no longer counted in bales of cotton, but flowing through export invoices and supply chain dividends, watched over not by a man with a whip, but by a party official in a Gucci tailored suit. The cruelty may have changed its uniform, but not its purpose or its corrosive power. And so the hard rain falls, century after century, littering our progress with ghosts we never truly buried. Now, David Ricardo, now I'm being really tough on David here, but you would have called it comparative advantage. Lincoln, and perhaps even Trump, would have called it organised cruelty. Because comparative advantage was never meant to mean that nations suffer under the command to save. It was never meant to dislocate entire regions, to erase towns and replace meaningful labour with boxes of goods arriving at doorsteps, bearing the scent. What is that scent? What is that scent? The scent of despair. The opioid crisis in the United States is not merely a health failure, it's the spiritual invoice of a global trade regime that forgot its people. It's the symptom of a deeper collapse, one that began not with a noble declaration, but with a decision to prioritize stock price gains over meaning. And for decades, everyone knew it. The solution was obvious, sitting there right in the open. Tariffs were not just tools for restoring economic equilibrium under a false Chinese exchange rate and these endless capital flows. Tariffs were instruments of justice, except no one dared touch them. To do so meant confronting offending perhaps the deep architecture of speculative capital, the same elite neural networks and financial cults that thrive on motion, motion without friction, profit without boundaries. The witches of the East, Frank Bohm's Wall Street banks from The Wizard of Oz. The banks always got what they want: unrestricted capital, compliant labour, inflated asset prices, and a global class of consumers too disorientated to revolt. Only not this time. Because Trump had watched a generation of politicians click their heels and recite the same bland Wall Street slogans. The lion depicted in Frank Baum's novel, The Wizard of Oz. King of the jungle, he had no roar until the king was restored. Until that point, the politicians from either party, either side of the aisle, they said it was all too complex, way too delicate. It was way too important to disturb. No one dared to bring the house of cards down. Even today, with the evidence plenty that the average American would benefit far more from a rally in the housing stock, the new stock price highs, the inertia is manifest. So Trump 2.0, loud, crude, dismissed by nearly everyone as a clown. I am, you can't see me, but I am holding my hands up, myself included. I got the guy wrong. But me, he did something most refined minds refused to attempt. He said the system is killing us. And he reached for the only lever left. He didn't care for stock market consensus. The property magnate didn't worship the equity market. He saw the cost, not in dollars, but in the despair of the American interior, from the very people that voted for him, not once, but twice. Their allegiance, their fealty. Their tariffs are not detailed policy plans. They're certainly not elegant. But there's something far more rare. They're a refusal to continue pretending that the supply chain was ethical, that the prices were honest, that the pain had vanished simply because it was outsourced. The pretense, the pretense was that America could continue under such a tilted, poisonous structure. And Trump, he named the villain. He disrupted the drug. Not fentanyl alone, but the drug of cheap abundance, the narcotic of convenience, the unspoken agreement that someone else's suffering was a fair price for our comfort for higher stock markets. Like Lincoln, Trump was willing to create pain, not for its own sake, but because comfort had become complicit. That's his storm. That's his gospel. So let him be judged. Let him be judged, I say, with Lincoln. Not for eloquence, not for moral polish, but for the courage to grasp the third rail and to speak the unspeakable, to declare that the sickness of the Republic was it wasn't sentimental or social, but it was economic, and that the profit margins so worshipped by Wall Street had become the enemy of the state. And so I say, bravo for the tempest, bravo for the pain, bravo for breaking the silence that built this empire of quiet cruelty. Better, my friends, unleash the storm, then let the poison keep flowing. Okay, I am sure you will be very relieved to hear that we're reaching the final innings. Not far to go. And then I'm out of your ears, out of your head. The last section, let's call it the last tariff. I'm thinking Daniel Day-Lewis, The Last of the Mohicans. Have you seen that movie? I love that movie. I don't want to spoil the plot, but at the end when he holds the lady, I'm a big one for holding the ladies, and he's like, I will find you, and he jumps off the cliff into the waterfall. God, not the last of the Mohicans, but the last tariff. Okay. Hamilton taxed for structure. Lincoln taxed for morality. Trump, he taxed for disruption. But they all touched the same lever, the price of power. You can actually measure a nation's soul by what it dares to make expensive. And tariffs, they're nothing more than a toll booth on the road to civil conscience. Now, the financial press will not tell you this story. That the most significant effort to rebalance American power in decades comes from a man in a red hat, tweeting between rounds that tariffs, those dusty relics of Hamilton and his toolkit, they're not tools of exclusion, but they are the instruments of an economic awakening. That Lincoln once wielded them not to shield the North, but to strangle the South's addiction to slave-grown cotton. And now, a century and a half later, Trump reached for the same instrument. Blunt, clumsy, but aimed, no matter however chaotically, at the same target. An economy poorly built on someone else's quiet misery. An economy becoming a colony burdened by an exorbitant privilege. And the economists missed it. Or perhaps even they refused to see it. In 1981, 364 Almost an economist for every day of the year signed their names to a letter in the London Times. A chorus of smug, conceited confidence, warning that Margaret Thatcher's austerity programme, it would break Britain, that her policies had no basis in economic theory, no grounding in experience, no hope of success. Inflation, they determined, inflation would rage, industry would collapse, society would fray. My friends, we know, with the benefit of time, that they spoke with fake authority. They spoke with the comfort of degrees, university degrees, diplomas on their walls, and tenure at their backs. But they were wrong, or at least history didn't bend the knee in their direction. Inflation fell, growth returned, and the world moved on. Their letter remains yellowing in the archives, a relic of expert conceit. It reminds us that orthodoxy is often the last to notice when the wind has truly changed, and that the guardians of consensus will always rise to condemn what they no longer understand. These are not prophets. These are the keepers of the spreadsheet temple, priests in soft shoes. They want consent, not courage. They want consensus, not conflict. They want central banks polished and silent. But we do not need consensus. We need cranks. We need the guys who speak too loud, that laugh in the wrong room at the wrong time, that see patterns where others see compliance. We need the out of sorts economists, the ones still scarred by something real. In 2020, I wrote The Dawn of Chaos, and I called for something no one would dare suggest in print. I called for Joe Rogan to be made the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Trump, are you listening? Not because of his credentials, but because of his posture. Because we needed someone who'd been hit in the mouth, someone who knew how to keep breathing when the models failed. We didn't need a modern monetary theorist. We needed a mixed martial artist, someone to fight the fight, to break the cycle, to disturb the slumber of a system that has ceased to serve the many. Because what are we protecting really? I mean, the economists, they're comfortable. Wall Street is fluent in both Mandarin and haute cuisine menu pricing. The liberal press, once guardians of the working class, those idiots now scoff at any attempt to defend the franchise. They sit in glass towers and they mock the one man who has the gall to say it out loud. This cannot go on. That something is rotting beneath the profit. China's Communist Party and Wall Street's titans have become twins, tied by leverage, tied by silence. Each just has too much to lose if this changes. But something must change. Not gently, not professionally, but with rupture, with risk, with the kind of clarity that doesn't ask for applause. This is not about tariffs. This is about the covenant, about the system, about who the system serves, about whether you will continue laboring in someone else's empire. Will you be happy to be optimized? Will you be content to be the offspring of someone else's comparative advantage? Or whether you will finally, brutally or otherwise, whether you will reclaim your own future. Albert Camus, he's like a spiritual father to me. And he would remind me at these moments that there is, my boy, my son, there is no redemption. Only the choice to revolt. Others might whisper that history hums in patterns. hollow men echoing the same refrain. Futurologists might even say that the future has already happened. But we, me, you, us, we can still choose how to remember it. So remember this again, my dear friends. In the end, someone stood up and someone said no. Not to all of it, not cleanly, but someone said no. And for once, the machinery flinched. That ought to do it. I mean, whoa, I think we've done it. We've done it. I mean, that was, is it just me? I mean, it's getting hot in here. But that was friggin' intense. Now, I'll almost certainly have more to say in the coming weeks. Less politics and history, I hope. More economic and market analysis. But for now, the acid capitalist. I mean, I'm wishing you all a happy and prosperous and gorgeous Easter vacation. May the sun shine brightly on all of my acid capitalists. And remember, don't believe the hype. And with that, I'm signing off from paradise. Take care, my dear friends. Kisses, hugs from Hugh, Hendry. Goodbye until the next time.